Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah if you're new here, and in today's video we're going to talk about book recommendations for standalones. I love a good series. I'm a big fantasy reader. Many fantasies are epic series, but every once in a while it's nice to just consume the entire story in one book. That's what today's video is all about. The standalones we are going to be discussing today are all adult standalones, and I tried to keep this list to books that I haven't featured very heavily on my channel yet, or I think need a little bit more love. I could talk about Brandon Sanderson, I could talk about Sarah Gailey and Sylvia Moreno Garcia and their standalones, but I'm gonna try to talk about some books that I read maybe a while ago, or maybe I just haven't talked about them very much, and I think they deserve lots of love. In no particular order, sort of categorized by genre, these are the 10 adult standalones that I recommend. Our first pick today is Hammett by Maggie O'Farrell. This is a historical fiction novel with like the tiniest dash of fantasy. This is about the family of William Shakespeare, and it's kind of chronicling their lives to an extent, and also the effects of a plague, you know, the Black Death, that plague that is sweeping Europe, and how that affects this family in particular. It is one of the most beautifully written books I have ever read. I made my mom read it, and she made my uncle read it, and my aunt read it, and they all loved it. This won a I believe this won the Women's Literary Fiction, or the Women's Fiction Prize, or it was in the top 10 for sure, and I highly recommend this one if you're in the mood to maybe cry a little bit. This one is a little hard-hitting, and since we are dealing with a plague, be gentle to yourself. Next, we have a book that I literally cannot stop thinking about, and that is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This is about Dana, who is a Black woman living in the 70s, and she is called back in time to save her white slave-owning ancestor, and how that goes down. So this is a little bit of a speculative angle, also historical fiction in a way, and just the relationship between Dana and her ancestor is quite interesting. Like I said, this is a book that I cannot stop thinking about. It was so powerful and impactful on me, and I, from here, basically decided Octavia E. Butler was another favorite author of mine and have read many of her other works after this, but to this day, I still think about this story and the messages it has to this day, and I read it several years ago at this point. Also, trigger warnings in this one for obviously racism, slavery, torture, all that sort of stuff. So again, be gentle. A book that needs not much introduction is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. I have a whole review up for this on my channel, and it's not that I don't talk about this book, it's that it's such a new favorite and it's sticking so prevalently in my mind. I just want more and more people to read this standalone. This is about Viv, who is an orc barbarian, and she decides to retire from her life of mercenary work and open a coffee shop in a fantastical setting. This is adorable, this is sapphic, this is sweet and slow-paced and very slice of life, and not typically my favorite type of narrative, slice of life, but I really got sucked in by this story and these lovely characters. The author is the one to narrate his own book, which is an excellent audiobook, and he is planning to write more in this world, but they will be a spin-off kind of book in the same world, but not following the same characters. Next, we have quite the chunker. This is The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. This is one of the best standalone epic fantasy stories I have ever read. One of the most emotionally impactful books ever. This is about essentially two characters. We have Mamoru, who is a 14-year-old boy who's training in his magical powers and learning some truths about himself and his family and his culture that are a little uncomfortable for him. And this also follows Misaki, who is Mamoru's mother, as she is also grappling with her role as the woman of the house in a very patriarchal society. And this story revolves around their little peninsula being attacked by a neighboring country and how this family is called to defend the land. This is so powerful and epic and emotional, but also has great world building, great writing. The magic is very similar to the elemental magic in, like, let's say Avatar: The Last Airbender. And so I think if you are an adult fantasy reader and you enjoy elemental magic, this is definitely one I would pick up. These tabs are all places that I choked up and cried a little bit, so be careful. Definitely look up trigger warnings for this one. It's a pretty sad read. It is a war story, so keep that in mind. Next, we have something maybe a little bit more lighthearted, and that is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Now, this is a book that I read several years ago, but it's one of those that I still kind of think about and have really fond memories of. And this book introduced me to the sci-fi thriller genre. So on a personal note, this book just kind of opened up a door to me into that genre, and I freaking love sci-fi thrillers slash horror novels now. This is about a man named Jason who is kidnapped, and when he wakes up, he's kind of back in his home, but his wife is no longer his wife, and his home is no longer his home, and everything has seemed to change, and sci-fi thriller things happen from there. I don't want to give too much away because this is a thriller, and the discovery of what is going on with Jason is kind of the whole point of the book. This is written super fast-paced. It almost reads like a screenplay with, some very short clipped sentences to kind of give you a little gut punch, but I kind of enjoyed that about reading this book. I read it in one sitting, and if you're a sci-fi fan or if you're just interested in a thriller, I highly recommend most Blake Crouch standalones, but Dark Matter in particular. The next book we have is If We Were Villains by Emil Rio. This is getting a lot of attention now on Book Talk, and I'm really, really happy for that because I read this book years ago when it first came out, and I don't think it got the attention and the love that it deserves, so I'm happy to see it kind of resurfacing and getting kind of a new fan base. This is a book about Oliver, and at the beginning of the book, he is being released from prison after, I think, 10 years for a crime he didn't commit, and he is explaining what actually happened to the detective, and explaining why he decided to go to prison instead of the real perpetrator of the crime. So this is told in kind of like that type of narrative structure where someone is telling you their story, so there's a little bit of a framing narrative there. And then the story itself is about Oliver when he is in a theater college, which solely does Shakespeare plays, and about him and his 7 friends as they get entangled, drama ensues, and a crime is committed, and that is slowly revealed to us over time. This is an excellent, excellent book. I love the writing in here. I enjoyed the mystery. Eventually you kind of you see what's gonna happen, so I kind of did guess the ending, but I think the unraveling of this story is truly excellent. The themes in here of like the toxicity of the culture within this academic institution was spot on, and it was scathing. A particularly scathing review of academia and how cutthroat it can be, even in a liberal arts setting. Excellent, excellent thriller mystery here. Another sci-fi thriller is The First 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North. This is a sci-fi thriller about this man named Harry August, and he keeps reliving his life over and over and over again. So he is born, he lives through his life, and when he dies, he is reborn again at the same time period. of his initial birth. So he keeps reliving the same time period over and over again. And there is a larger plot at stake as well, where there are other people like him that he tries to find and communicate with. Other, essentially, they're not really time travelers, but they move through time differently than, like, say, you and I. And this was captivating, spellbinding. I couldn't put this down. I just thought this was excellent. So if you're a fan of like sci-fi stories, time traveling stories, Groundhog's Day, this is a little bit more intense than Groundhog's Day, but that kind of vein. I highly recommend this one. Then we have Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This is, I would say, a standalone. There are continuations in this series, but I read this when it was a standalone and think of it as a standalone in my head. So with that caveat said, this is about Victor and Eli, who are best friends when they are in college, and they unlock the secret to superpowers, how to get superpowers, and that discovery kind of breaks them apart and makes them mortal enemies. So these go from best friends to enemies, and kind of the confrontation they had. And this is kind of a dual timeline story where we're following them in college and then years later when they are finally coming back together in a final showdown, if you will. This was just a fun ride. Again, I think I also read this in one sitting. It was just really interesting. The main character, Victor, is kind of psycho, and yet you're kind of rooting for him. So that kind of tug on the emotions in that way was really, really fascinating in my opinion. And I just think this was a fun time. A book I have kind of talked about a lot, but I'm going to reiterate my love for the end of time. That's Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. This is a sci-fi romance, I would say, pretty heavy on the romance, about these two men, Jinin and Kiem, and they are forced into an arranged marriage to stabilize the kind of the treaties between their two worlds. And this is about them kind of unraveling a larger mystery and a murder that took place, as well as them getting to know each other and falling in love. And as you can see, I'm smiling because I think the romance in here is kind of what sells it, what makes this book so special. Jinin and Kiem have their own individual baggage, and the way that they open up to each other and start to trust each other is so beautiful and moving. So there are, you know, sci-fi elements in here, but I think that if you're a romance reader and you want to start, you know, branching out into other genres, I would definitely give Winter's Orbit a try. And number 10, the last book I have to talk about and recommend is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. This is about Kara, who is able to traverse the multiverse for a major corporation. The reason Kara is able to go to so many different worlds is that her alternate persons have been killed off. So the different versions of herself have been killed. The limitation of this technology is only one version of yourself can exist in one world at a time. And one day she goes to a world and her alter still exists there. And she's trying to figure out how that happened and what is going on. And there is so much anti-capitalism in here. This is a sapphic romance as well. This also has to deal with like healing from trauma, from abusive relationships, which I thought that arc was so powerful and moving that even for that piece alone, I recommend this book. So if you're into space adventure, but also critiques on capitalism and big corporations with a side of romance, I highly recommend Space Between Worlds. Those are some of my favorite standalones and standalone recommendations for adult readers. Thank you so much for watching. What are some of your favorite standalones? I would love to know. Looking at my stack, I have a lot of sci-fi on here. I want more fantasy standalone recommendations. So if you have any fantasy standalones, leave a comment down below, because I would love to read more in that vein. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!